This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road, Jack, Finding the Zodiac. Last week, we were discussing or hearing about the audio tapes that Dennis Kaufman had recorded with different law enforcement agencies. We are going to go ahead and jump right back into that with Tom Connor from the South Lake Tahoe PD and hear what he has to say in regards to putting Dennis Kaufman into touch with Kathleen Johns. Oh, goodness. Okay. Sorry about that. I needed to share that presentation so we could see where we were at. Are we playing? I don't hear number 8 playing. Is it playing?
Did you ever get in touch with, he said he would go with me to show
Kathleen Johns?
Yeah, that
video. Good. I talked to Donna Lass's sister today about that, and she thought it was a real good idea, so I'm going to try to get Kathleen Johns a call and see if she's receptive to it.
Okay.
And I'll call you back and let you know where she's at.
Okay.
And then we can go from there.
Did you find out what area she's in? If she's,
right. We had another damn shooting and stuff, so.
Did you?
I've been busy, but anyway.
Okay.
See if I can. I'm working on something right at the moment, but
right.
I think I'll be done with that in just a minute or two. You at home?
Yeah.
That number real quick so I don't have to look it up.
916 729 4251. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to look it up and let you know what area she's in.
Okay, appreciate it.
Talk to you later.
Okay, Tom. Bye. Did you ever get in touch with, he said he would go with me to show...
It's replaying.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the gist of that particular conversation was Dennis attempting to get in touch with Kathleen Johns. They wanted to be able to share Jack's voice and his picture with her in order to make an identification. They thought this was the quickest way, obviously, of seeing if Jack was the one that she actually took that ride with. Now, I know that from, let's go ahead and play the next audio first, and then we'll discuss that afterwards. This one is Tom Connor again, and he wants a rapport with Kelly Carroll, who is not working with everyone else who is interested in this case.
Well, all I want is somebody that, if they've got some kind of rapport or in or any of that kind of stuff, where they can talk to those guys and get a straight-up answer,
Yeah.
That's all I'm looking for.
So you really don't have one, huh?
No, I don't.
You really don't?
No.
That's weird. I really thought you was just being hush, but I really think you don't have one either.
No, they have not told me one way or the other. Last they told me they were working on it. First of all, they told me they were working on it and would have an answer by mid-February.
Right.
Probably. Okay, so I waited to mid-March before I bugged them about it.
Mm-hmm.
Figured, things go wrong, you get off schedule. And then I didn't get calls for a long, long time. And then I think it was around May or June when you told Hitmeyer that you were going to run down there and stirred up all that shit. And
Yeah.
Carol called me.
Yeah.
And he told me at that time they still didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
So I'm going, this is bullshit.
Right.
But, so, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy does. I can't make the guy tell me.
Right. Well, I just figured since, that one day when they both called you real quick, I figured something was going on because they both called you real quick to either tell you, don't tell Dennis this or something,
Well, you stirred the shit. I got to give you that.
I
got
did.
some reactions anyway. The phone started ringing. So.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what the big deal is about going down and seeing Jack if they're really not, so obviously something's going on. What it was then. I don't know.
Well,
now.
Like I said, if this guy has some kind of working relationship with them to where they'll talk to him, I would like him to call me or give me an answer. So I'm not spinning my wheels anymore.
Exactly. Well, to be honest, he was here the other day. He actually came to the house. The sergeant did.
Yeah.
And we spent 5 hours here going through this stuff, and he was just couldn't believe it.
Good.
He was just shocked. He just says he just can't believe that that these guys aren't running with this because he's been Allen has been a suspect for a long time. Arthur Lee Allen.
Right.
And he admitted, that Allen doesn't even compare to Jack. It's just the similarities is incredible.
Yeah.
And like I said, we spent 5 hours going over this stuff, and he said I'm going to get that print and I'm going to check it out myself.
Well, you talked to him about showing Kathleen Johns that video and see if he'd be interested in sitting there while it happens. And if it is, I can get in touch with her and you have him call me, and I'll try to arrange that.
Okay, all right, and then
and I don't, if he wants to come up here, I'll sit in with it too, But
sure,
he's the guy that has the strongest case. It sounds like. And
well, just because so many, and this is in a county that the Zodiac hasn't even known to have committed any crimes in, really.
Yeah.
It was just the fact that one of the radians went through there, and there was a lot of unsolved homicides in there, and they didn't have any answers for him.
Yeah.
He said this is the best thing he's heard. It makes total sense to him.
Well, whatever. Like I said. Talk to him, see what he says, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Do you know what area Kathleen Johns is in? Is she like up by you?
I'm trying to remember whether she's in San Jose or whether she's in another, because the sister called me and she went down and actually talked to excuse me, I was eavesdropping on somebody else's conversation.
Okay.
Because I heard my name came up. But anyway, she talked to a gal named Pam Huckabee, a gal named Linda Bowman, and both those people are sisters to Darlene Farron.
Yeah, I talked to Pam before myself.
And then she also talked to Kathleen Johns. Now, between the three of them, one lives in San Jose, one lives in Oregon, and one lives somewhere else down there in the Bay Area, and I forget exactly where at the moment.
I see.
So.
Okay, so they're not up in your area then?
No, none of them live up here.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I'll talk to him, see what he says, and I'll put him in touch with you. Just you'll keep me informed. If I put him in touch with you,
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I got nothing to hide, Dennis.
I know you don't. It's just how the FBI is kind of real secretive about what they do and stuff.
Well, they do that for good reason, and sometimes we do, but right at the moment, I've got nothing to hide from you, and this wouldn't. You're a cooperative witness. Why would I not cooperate with you?
Right? Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Well, so. like I told you before, the only reason I did that report is because I get so frustrated because I can't get an answer from San Francisco.
Yeah.
And it's I feel like I have to do something. It's
sure.
That's the only reason. But as long as I'm informed, hey, I ain't saying nothing to nobody, and that's the way it works. So as long as you understand that, then I don't mind putting you in touch with that officer.
Okay.
He just asked me not to say who he was, so I got to respect that.
And I respect that also.
Okay.
And if he says I don't want to let him know, that's fine.
Okay.
But if he wants to talk to me, he can talk to me.
Okay.
All righty.
All right, Tom. We'll talk to you soon, man.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, so basically the ending result of the visit with Kathleen Johns per Dennis was that Dennis was put up in a hotel the night before the meeting in Sonoma County, I believe. At that point in time, he was there, he was ready. He woke up in the morning and was delivered the news that Kathleen Johns had suffered a heart attack and died. Of course, no way to verify that other than obviously believing that that was the truth. It was an unfortunate accident, I guess if you will. I mean, maybe the stress of this entire case, maybe seeing her perpetrator once again was going to be too much for her. I do believe she was in her late 70s or 80s, I believe, at that time. So there's a good chance that could have caused the heart attack. And to me, that's just another victim, obviously, of the Zodiac killer, along with Arthur Lee Allen, who died from a heart attack, probably due to the stress that was placed on him by being investigated for doing things he did not do. So that concludes these particular audio tapes. And I had some follow up with that. Obviously, I waited on the laundry and research until after these audio tapes were played. But I did actually go back into Dennis's book. And interestingly enough, I found another image that Dennis had placed on the backside of his book, which we can once again see that up here is that square type hood with the corners, and it appears to have the buckling along the top, which again would probably indicate it did not have the girth or the width that it needed, so that when the head was placed inside of it, it would cause that buckling to occur. Keep in mind, this book was written probably about 2002, 2003, at least as far as I can tell. The dates in it end in 2002, well before Dennis actually had found the hood. So these perceptions of what he used or what he believed were probably the oldest versions or perceptions of the hood that he could find. So I find once again that this is a consistent match with what was going on with the actual hood that Dennis later found in 2008. Now, Dennis also wrote about his experiences with law enforcement. So aside from the actual audio tapes we just listened to, we get to see what he actually had to say about these instances. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to read everything from the book, but if you are going to watch this live or watch this later at another point, you can certainly read these excerpts from his book yourself. And I'm just going to start with those that are important and related to the actual law enforcement conversations. So Dennis says, Tom Connor was busy working on current cases, so I contacted the San Francisco Police Department. I talked to a homicide inspector named Kelly Carroll. Mr. Carroll told me that every week he gets a phone call from somebody claiming to know who the Zodiac killer is. Mr. Carroll told me to send him whatever I had in the mail, and he would take a look at it when he could. I told him that I had too much stuff to send in the mail. I also had things that I would have to explain, otherwise they would appear to be irrelevant. Kelly told me he did not have time to check into every call that came in regarding the Zodiac. That was the end of the conversation. He thought I was just another quack that didn't know what I was talking about. I then contacted the Napa County Sheriff's Department and talked to a detective named Brian Benducci. I told him that I was aware that people call you to this day claiming to know the identity of the Zodiac killer without really knowing. I told him that I have evidence to support my outrageous claim. I offered to drive it to him that day, and he said that he would call me back in a couple days. If he really thought that I knew the identity of this killer, he would have had me take it to him right then. I was beginning to get very irritated at this whole thing. I knew the police were sick of people calling them all the time about the Zodiac, and now that someone really does know who it is, the police won't listen. Now, this is kind of the same response I got from Napa folks. Dennis and I went to Napa Sheriff's Department, I want to say 2012, 2013, somewhere around there, in order to deliver the handwriting evidence. And of course, we were greeted by two detectives that one was the Napa police, one was Napa Sheriff, and they had been given grant money by the government to research or go back in and reinvestigate cold cases. So I thought hearing that information meant that they would have more resources. The handwriting had already been done. Here's a great jump start to this. We met with the detectives, which is really kind of, again, frustrating that they had us come all the way out to Napa, which is almost 2 hours from where Dennis and I were, maybe a third hour for Dennis to drive. But we get there, they sit down with us in the room, they ask us a couple brief questions, and then they just want to take my opinion letter or my report, which if you've ever seen my report, you are not going to be able to tell what that report means. I do not label it with anything other than the handwriting itself, because then I can describe that as we walk through the report, which I offered to do with Napa. And at that particular point in time, they declined to allow me to go over that presentation. They then just collected the information and sent us on our way. Again, disheartening. We've gone out of our way to put evidence together. I've done a complete presentation for Napa, all just for them themselves, and they don't want to hear it. So it didn't surprise me to see this in his book, that he did not receive a call back and that the man was not interested, because it seems to be that that is Napa's typical inclination to do. And more disheartening, because I actually am from Napa. I lived in Napa all of my life from a small child. And I thought for sure that, Napa would be concerned, Napa would want answers. And I found that to be the contrary, just like when I reached out and made a connection here in the last couple weeks and was told to contact the OJ. So continuing in Dennis's book, it says, let's see, as we were walking inside, he asked me what this was regarding, and I told him, let's see if I don't. He'd gone into the FBI and to see about dropping off some of the documents, and he met up with the same security guard who was working there, and he remembered Dennis from coming in the day before. He asked him if we could just drop some things off and the agent can take a look at them. He told us to come inside and he would find out. And as we were walking inside, he asked me what it was regarding, and Dennis told him it was about the Zodiac. He asked me if he could see what kind of proof I had, and I showed him the picture of Jack next to the composite of the Zodiac. At that point, he knew I was for real. He told the clerk that I needed to leave some documents here to have an agent look at. She said it was normally not their policy, but she said we could leave them. So they rushed to make some copies, and it looks like Joy rushed into the FBI to tell them that Dennis was coming with the copies. I looked up and saw Joy running toward me, yelling, "Hurry up." An agent was waiting to talk to us. I couldn't believe that someone was actually taking us seriously. Tom Smith was so impressed with how close Jack matched the composite that he was able to get us inside to talk to an agent. And that agent was Special Agent Ken Hittmeyer, which we've heard from him on the phone calls. Joy and I sat and talked to Mr. Hittmeyer for about 2 hours. He listened to everything I had to say. I got him very interested. He told Joy and I to go gather as much information about Jack as we could, and when we were done, to call him. So they went back to the storage, and we both felt a little strange about having to turn a family member into the police, but we had no choice under the circumstances. We went to work gathering more information about Jack, had to talk to relatives, and at the same time, be careful not to make it obvious what we were doing. After a week later, I called Ken back and told him that we had a fairly detailed chronology of Jack's history. Ken asked us to bring it down. When we arrived this time, we were treated like celebrities almost. And I know that feeling, because initially when I came into the FBI, I thought it was going to be this big to-do, that we had to go through security and all of these other things. And literally speaking, after my first time there, we were just kind of waved right on through and didn't even have to worry about any of those things. And it was like entering the bar Cheers, because Norm, there is Dennis Kaufman, and everybody there in that office knew who he was. So to continue with Dennis's book, Joy and I must have spent a couple hours with Ken going over the information we gathered. Ken said that he was going to do some research on Jack and that he would give us a call when he was done. It was just a few days later when Ken called me and wanted me to bring him a letter that Jack had sent me. He wanted to extract any usable DNA from the envelope. This was a major step forward, because a couple weeks earlier, we couldn't get anybody to take us serious, and now the FBI wanted to get Jack's DNA. Later that day, I got another call from the FBI, and they also wanted me to bring my photo album to them. Things seemed to be happening faster than I thought they would. The following day, Joy and I went back to the FBI, but on the way there, we stopped and I made color copies of my photo album, so I had copies for myself. When we arrived, Ken came out and said he was talking to agents from the Department of Justice about Jack. We gave him the envelopes and a photo album. He asked us to wait, and he would be out after he was done. 30 minutes later, Ken came out and let us know what the status was, and he said this thing should be done within a couple months. I felt we had done all we needed to do at this point. We set this thing in motion. About a week later, Ken called me and said this case is going to take a little longer than I had originally anticipated. He said that all the Zodiac letters had been sent back to the counties they came from. And I'm assuming at this point that is when Ken Hittmeyer reached out to Kelly Carroll with the SFPD. Or no, I'm sorry, it was Chris Hopkins. Special Agent Chris Hopkins had reached out to Kelly Carroll and indicated that they could have a turnaround within 30 days on the DNA if the FBI had ran it. And Kelly Carroll said, no, I'll run it. Go ahead and send it to me. Now, December 14th, 2000, this is obviously a month or so after, at 9 a.m., Joy and I arrived at the FBI headquarters, and our attorney, John Moreno, was there waiting. Special Agent Hopkins told us to come back to his office. I said in a joking manner to Mr. Hopkins, could you tell this man that I'm not insane? Mr. Hopkins turned to Mr. Moreno and said, I'll be truthful with you. Dennis is a nut. And I totally know Chris Hopkins' humor, so that is hilarious. And yes, I could see him saying that. Mr. Hopkins is a very professional man with a sense of humor. I had met him on prior occasions. The first time I met with Mr. Hopkins, I presented my geographical theories to him, and he told me that I had done my homework. We spent about an hour going over the case, and the attorney asked Mr. Hopkins what he thought about my credibility, and he said, Dennis passed all the tests. John Moreno was shocked to find out that everything we told him was true. I don't know why. I mean, obviously, he's presenting the evidence to them at the same time he's giving the stories. But all right. So it looks like that they had started to move into a motel, or they'd gotten a motel, and then they'd spend the next couple weeks just relaxing. He says, I started writing everything down that had transpired since I discovered who Jack was. Then I got a surprise visit from my sister, Geneva, her husband, and her 3 children. They were on their way to Texas to stay with Jack. Couldn't believe the bad timing this was. I didn't want them or the kids around Jack while all this was happening. I couldn't tell them because they would tell Jack. I had to just hope that everything would turn out as planned. They headed for Texas, and I notified Agent Hittmeyer that my sister and her family is on their way to Texas to live with Jack. He wasn't happy about this because it could interfere with the investigation. On January 3rd, 2001, so obviously within days of Geneva showing up at Jack's house, Child Protective Services showed up at Jack's house for a safety inspection. Now, I'm not sure what prompted that, or if that was some type of a movement that the FBI made, because I don't rightly believe, unless she was in some type of trouble back where she was living, that they would show up to her new residence in Texas. But at any rate, on January 3rd, 2001, Child Protective Services showed up at Jack's house for a safety inspection. When they entered the house, they found evidence that meth was being manufactured there. I knew that my sister's husband was responsible for this. I think that they were there because of the situation with Jack. My sister's children were taken from her, and one of the requirements to get them back was that she breaks all contact with Jack. Again, a very strange notion to ask for. She moved out and eventually got them back. This raised suspicion in Jack's mind because he did not have any felony charges on his record, but Jack started acting different after that happened. So it was almost as if he started to realize that he was under suspicion himself. Throughout the month of January 2001, I talked back and forth with Agent Hittmeyer. We are waiting to hear from SFPD. January has come and gone, and we have still not heard anything from them. They were supposed to have the DNA testing done by January 1st, 2001. This waiting was starting to take a toll on my mind. Every day seemed like a year. Joy and I headed for Washington, February 13th, 2001. Our friend Judy called and said John Baird from KOVR 13 News was looking for me, and she gave me the number he had left. I called the number, and John Baird told me that they were going to be doing a segment on the Zodiac on Monday night, and they would be filming the next few days. I told him that I would leave tomorrow morning and head that way. So, of course, they did arrive in Sacramento, and they did actually It says February 15th, 2001, Joy and I arrive in Sacramento, and as soon as we get in town, our pager goes off. It was Agent Hitmeyer. He wanted to see if I could get John Baird to hold off on airing that segment until a later date. I told him I will see what I can do. I met with Mr. Baird that same night at a restaurant. He said the segment is already set to air Monday night. He tried to get me to go into certain details of the case, and I could not do that because I was told by the FBI not to mention certain things. On February 16th, 2001, Joy and I went to KOVR 13 studio, and I did about a 10-minute interview. They had me silhouetted. I was careful not to say too much. On February 19th, 2001, Joy, Judy, and myself watched the segment. I was disappointed because they made me look like another idiot with another theory. After the news was over, I called John Baird and asked why he did that, and he told me he knew things that I did not know, and he told me that Jack would probably never be arrested. So again, I'm seeing the signs that people are in the know, and they don't want us to know, so they tell us we're in over our head, or that they know things that we don't. To state that Jack would probably never be arrested would be to assume that they already knew who Jack was well before Dennis presented this information, not because Jack was not the suspect they were looking for. Those words have never come out of anybody's mouths. He says, I figured it was his way of getting back for me not telling him everything I knew. Then I asked myself, does he really know something that I don't? Was I really being played? If so, why? All the time and effort that has been spent on this, and now John Baird says that Jack probably won't be arrested. The following day, I called Special Agent Hitmeyer and asked him if he had heard from SFPD, and he had not. I didn't know how much more of this I could take. February 25th, 2001, he got a fax from his brother, basically wanting to disown him if he continued with these antics that would possibly cost Charles his father after already having lost his mother. They did a few exchanges and made up, obviously, but coming back to working with the police, March 5th, 2001, I spoke with Ken Hitmeyer, and he still has not heard from SFPD. I was about at the end of my rope with this damn Zodiac shit. I was losing the people that meant the most to me over this thing. The DNA was supposed to be done 3 months ago, and we haven't heard from them. So a week later, on March 9th, 2001, Ken called me back and said the news is still no news. It was then I realized that the same thing that happened 30 years ago was happening again. Ken was finally forced to tell me that these police agencies are not cooperating with each other because they all want to be the one who solves the case. Ken told me that I was the one who identified this person. Personally, I just wanted this thing to be over. I was not concerned about who would be credited with solving it. Ken said that a homicide inspector from SFPD was not cooperating with him. I knew who this guy was because I had previous conversations with the inspector. March 12th, 2001, I decided to call this homicide inspector myself and find out what was going on. So I did. He thought at first the FBI put me up to calling him, but I assured him that this was my own choice. I asked him if there was anything at all that I could do to speed this thing up a bit. The inspector was more concerned about the rumors than he was about this case. And we got to hear that actually in the audio tape. He wanted to find out who the person was that was saying he was not cooperating, because that looked bad on him. Either way, the thing that bothered me most, Dennis said, was they had not even started the DNA testing. So now we're in March of 2001. The following Saturday, I got a call from SFPD, and it was a homicide inspector that I was supposed to meet next week. He said that DNA testing has been started. He told me to go ahead and go to Washington, and as soon as he got the results, he would call me. I did not like the thought of having to start all over again, but at least it was getting done, or so I thought. On Monday, I spoke with Special Agent Hitmeyer and Hopkins and informed them of the current status with the SFPD. I told them Joy and I were heading back to Washington, and when I heard from SFPD, I would give them a call. So basically, they made that trip. Now, May and June 2001, still no answer on any DNA. I know that they would have had the results back by now. Something is not right. It seems as if the police would rather this case go unsolved. July 9th, 2001, the person that I had by my side every day for 15 years was now gone. So Joy, getting tired of all of the runaround and all of the moving from place to place and just trying to find some place to lay their head so that they could continue this investigation, finally took that toll on her. Now, I also found a list of the items in Dennis's book that was handed over to Steve Brown of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department. In that was a photo album, and I've seen many of those photos, though I found many more photos in Jack's items that actually placed him at different locations during times of murders in different states. So I found that to be extremely interesting, and I did a chronological order of those photos. We'll talk about those at a later date. So he also turned over a black folder of Jack's paperwork, which is likely a lot of the handwriting that he had also given me, a cassette tape of Dennis and Jack talking, when Dennis asks Jack if he was the Zodiac, Jack's response was, "Let me see what time it is." He also turned over the Imperial brand knife that was yellow in color with a broken and bent tip, approximately 3-inch blade. So now I have supporting proof, even though I couldn't show you guys in the pictures, that blade was actually broken off, probably about a little less than 1/4 of an inch, but bent as well. And then the blue pens, the razor point, or the AKA pilot pens that Dennis had found inside of this little tiny lockbox that contained the knives, the rolls of film, the jewelry that were one earring of each kind. So no particular earring had its full set there. Another list of items that he had turned over was the leather case, earrings, keys, and a green knife, a Shell oil keychain. Now, remember, we kept talking about the Shell oil relation and the oil relation to this particular case. Again, just trying to follow the money and see why these particular type of things like the GMAC keychain and the Shell oil keychain and the Rockford, Illinois locker key was in this particular box of all things, because Jack did actually have a jar of keys that he kept, and obviously these keys were kept separate from that in this particular lockbox with these other items. He'd also turned over some envelopes and 2 books. One was a basic electricity and electronics, and the other was a dipper full of stars. I hadn't really actually made any correlation to the astrology point of this. I've kind of steered clear of it because it wasn't kind of in the wheel well of Jack. But now, after finding out that Dennis had turned over a book called A Dipper Full of Stars, I actually looked up to see what that was. And it's a beginner's guide to the heavens. A Dipper Full of Stars, a beginner's guide to the heavens, is astronomy is the most fascinating of all hobbies. Excuse me. So the enjoyment of the study of the stars can begin with earliest childhood. Now, so that obviously perked up my ears, because now we do actually have some astrological references, though we don't know if this wasn't something Jack picked up after being named the Zodiac and decided he would kind of play into that. I like to defer to the fact that he grew up on a ranch, and the winter and summer solstices and astrology and the planting seasons, all of these things would have been common knowledge for somebody who worked on a ranch. So something he may have had ahead of time, but if he had decided he was going to neatly play into some type of an astrology effect or astronomy effect, then yes, we could see that he would have included something like this. Now, I also thought maybe this is where the palm prints were developed from that Steve Brown had obtained. One thing I haven't been able to figure out is where he got Jack's palm prints, but we do know that he has them. So, in working with the police, I guess out of frustration, Dennis had sent an email to Inspectors Maloney and Carroll at the Zodiac Police at mindspring.com. It said, "Hello, Mr. Carroll and Mr. Maloney. I had a couple questions for you. I am not trying to ridicule you or work against you. Last time I was frustrated, I went to the media. This time I'm trying to handle this in a more appropriate manner. Why is it so hard to get a straight answer from your department? Is there no original Zodiac evidence left? This is not uncommon in high-profile cases. 3 other law enforcement agencies say the same thing about not being able to get a straight answer from your department, and sometimes their calls are not returned at all. The FBI told your department back in November of 2000 that their laboratory could have the DNA test done in 30 days, and 9 months later, we are still waiting. This is frustrating, and if you were in my shoes, you would feel the same way. I understand that Things don't always go as planned, but some straight answers once in a while would be appreciative. If in fact there is no original Zodiac evidence left, then this case could be approached from a different angle. The geographical aspect of this case could be the key factor. A detective came here to the house last week, and him and I spent several hours going over the geographical aspects, and the pattern is undeniably accurate. And Jack is directly connected. I have not had a chance to show you this part. The odds of winning the lottery are much better than this just being a coincidence. If you were successful in extracting DNA and Jack's DNA did not match, or if Jack's handwriting and original Zodiac letter was sent to CI and I for comparison, and they said there was no match, I would pursue this no longer. Right now, if something was to happen to me, I have someone that knows where all the original documents are, and they would continue to pursue this. They know Jack as well, they know Jack as well. I am sure you guys are always busy working in San Francisco, but if you could let me or one of the other agencies involved know where this case stands as far as DNA is concerned, it would sure be helpful. P.S. A 16-year-old was found dead about a month ago in Texas, and my brother's pistol was found in his hand, and 2 shots had been fired. My brother went to his girlfriend's for the weekend, and when he returned, Jack asked him if he had taken his .22 pistol because it was missing. My brother reported it stolen, and a couple weeks later, a detective called him and informed him his gun has been used in a suicide. The things that don't sound right is if someone broke in, they would have taken the other gun that was in the same drawer, as well as the coin collection. And the coin collection comes back to what we were listening to Harriet Suchet talk about in regards to the police searching her coins in her house, which I'm not sure if we've discussed yet, but we'll have her on to talk about that. Very odd, since they were supposed to be there to only interrogate Dennis, and it turned out they actually had basically raided her house and gone through a majority of her drawers, including her underwear drawer, where a sack of coins were kept, and they went through that after telling her they were looking for something quite big, such as a small boat or a small truck, which could never have fit inside of a drawer. Now, let's see. The things they don't sound okay. The other gun that was not taken was registered to Jack. This is the first time Jack had a running automobile in several months. I talked to the police, and they're going to take a closer look. Waiting to hear from you. Take care, Dennis Kaufman. So it looks like that back in Texas at this particular point in time, Dennis was finding out that his brother Charles's gun had been used in a suicide. After he had left for the weekend, it came up missing. And Jack was the one that brought this to his attention, which is oddly strange, because how would Jack have known that it was missing to begin with, or to look to see that it was missing, and then it winds up in a teenager's hand who ends up dead? So is it possible that Jack was also responsible for this murder? This is not one I have in the presentation, so it would be interesting to find out who this particular individual was around that time frame that had committed suicide. And I would have to dig really deep on that because I have very limited information over it. So now Jack at one point showed up at the new cell phone store after Dennis and Joy had gotten back together, created a great big huge fight. And I know if you've watched the Zodiac, the Real Story by Dennis Kaufman, you get to hear from a witness who was in the cell phone store that particular day, who felt that Jack was basically Satan incarnate. She stated the look on his face. Either way, he aggravated Dennis to the point that Dennis considered pulling a gun on him himself. And when he asked Joy if she would have an issue with that, she ran out of the store crying, never to be seen again. So this was the last time she ever showed up in Dennis's life. Dennis also, during this time, August 9th of 2002, found out that his biological father in Michigan had passed away. I know that he had some hopes of getting to know him, and that obviously had been washed away by his inability to make it out there. Now, in September of 2002, he says, I keep hoping there might be a chance that Jack will be brought to justice, but it has been 2 years and we still don't have any results on the DNA testing. This is absolutely insane, you guys. 2 years that this DNA testing was going on. And I had thought this, and I thought that that's what I recalled Dennis saying, but now we're seeing it in the book. On October 22nd, 2002, Primetime News claims that the San Francisco police have successful in extracting DNA from the Zodiac letters, and the results are in. I couldn't believe my eyes as I sat and watched the show I had been waiting for over 2 years. I keep waiting for them to mention Jack, and nothing about Jack was said. They did eliminate 3 suspects whose DNA was compared to the Zodiac's. I figured if Jack's DNA did match, they couldn't announce it on national television before they arrested him. I got several phone calls from different law enforcement agencies who worked with me, as well as my lawyer in Washington. Everyone thought that the Zodiac would finally be arrested. My brother Charles saw the show and asked me if they were going to be arresting his dad. I told him I wasn't sure what was going on. I stopped by my old apartment where Jack and Charles were still living. It had only been 2 days since the show aired. I could feel the tension from everyone, including Jack. So obviously, this would be the introduction. Now, so Primetime News, I don't know if this is the episode with Harry Phillips on 20 on 20, because I do not know when that show aired. But clearly, if they had cleared Arthur Lee Allen and 2 other suspects, then this is likely that same exact airing of the 20 on 20 episode in the DNA on the Zodiac. Dennis also believed that Jack was doing whatever he could do during this time. So between 2000 and 2005, or actually, between 2000 2005, I believe that Jack was really trying to keep Dennis from coming to any conclusions in this particular case and trying to prevent himself from being arrested, even though he didn't believe that they really had any evidence on them. I think that when Dennis kept hitting these stone walls, that's why we see Jack reach out to Tom Voigt in 2002 and 2003 with his letters offering to tell the real story, because he is still alive. He wants his story told. And if Dennis can't get it done, Jack is probably figuring he can go around the backside, get this done, and possibly make some money off of it for his family. Which was kind of an odd statement, that he could make this a blockbuster hit and that he would be willing to give proceeds to, I guess, victims and proceeds to his family from it. But he still wanted to stay anonymous at the time he told the story. It wasn't until 2005 that Jack actually came around, when Dennis said he quits, he gives up, he does not want to do this anymore. And that's when Jack kind of breaks down and starts to give Dennis the items that he needs. And unfortunately, less than a year from that point in time, Jack did actually pass away. So Jack had gone through different tactics, such as showing up at Dennis's apartment. And then when Dennis got infuriated and attempted to kick him out, he called the police. The police show up and Jack pretends like he has dementia, no place to go. And the police tell Dennis that it would be a felony to kick an elderly person out onto the street. So Jack was wise. He knew exactly what he was doing in order to get under Dennis's skin. And of course, that also happened, I believed, in 2002 or 2003. So at this time, Jack is still attempting to either stall or even possibly get Dennis in trouble so that Dennis cannot continue to investigate the case. Because like I said, it isn't until 2005 that Jack realizes that nobody wants this case solved, even though he's trying to give his identity out. And we see that in the finale letter that's written in 2005, when he says the identity has been I'm going to not quote the words correctly, but basically his identity has been given, which is fingerprints and DNA he sent to Tom Voigt, information Dennis has already given to the FBI. He believes that his identity is out there, but it is still a secret, and understanding why is the key. So that's when I started diving into all the possibilities and the reasons why somebody would want this covered up. Jack's willing to tell, Dennis is willing to tell, the information is there. Police in San Francisco PD evidently is not doing their job. Napa has no interest. Do they know things that we don't know? The irony of coming to the end of Dennis's book is that I actually find a picture of him standing with Tom Voigt. I just about hit the floor. It made me giggle. So obviously they were cordial at some point in time before Voight starts to begin slamming and putting Dennis out there as some type of nut with daddy issues and all the things that he tries to claim. He obviously was very interested in Dennis's story at one point in time. But since he didn't get the story, and since he didn't get to actually be the one to advertise on the internet or otherwise that he was the guru who solved it, clearly he took an adverse position to Dennis and he began bashing him. I got some of that bashing as well when I joined Dennis's message board. But this is what he has to say about Tom Voight. And it is written, this is written again, you guys, 2002, 2003. It says, July 2002, while I was searching the internet for any current news on the Zodiac case, I noticed someone by the name of Tom Voight was having a Zodiac gathering at Blue Rock Springs, just outside of Vallejo. This was where one of the Zodiac crimes had taken place 33 years earlier. According to Tom Voight, the organizer of this event, the purpose of this gathering was for people who were interested in the case, could share theories and possibly shed some new light on the case. July 4th, 2002, I attended this gathering and I realized most of these people, including Tom Voight, had no interest in bringing the Zodiac to justice. I later realized Tom Voight was just a wacko trying to become a hero by solving the Zodiac case. And that didn't matter if it was on a false suspect. I mean, take one look at his message board. You'll see how much time they spend theorizing. And when I say theorizing, there's no hard evidence that they're working with. I can theorize from here till next Sunday on Jack's evidence because the evidence is right there in front of you. I can tell you he's in the area. I don't have to theorize it. I can tell you that he knows these things. I don't have to theorize it. I can tell you he's capable of these crimes. I don't have to theorize it. So here he is complaining that they're just theorizing about the case. When Mr. Voight realized that the police were more interested in Jack than his suspect, he did everything in his power to discredit me. I had set up a webpage, and Mr. Voight had saturated it with pornography over and over again. He even went as far as sending me an email that said he would rape my dead mother. Oh my Lord, I'm not shocked that Tom Voight did this because I know this individual and I've had him speak to me in some typical type of manners, of course, but not something as severe as that. But that's just disgusting, blows my mind. Anyways, I couldn't believe that someone would stoop to such a level. It was hard to not let this idiot get to me. This guy is nothing but a nutcase and does anything in his power to keep Zodiac from being brought to justice because his whole career would come to an end. I'm going to say clap, clap, clap. I think that he wrapped that up in a nutshell, and I'll probably try to get off my soapbox about Tom Voight. This is the final pages of Dennis Kaufman's book. Obviously, we can see Jack, one of the pictures that is used to compare to the composite, and the picture of Dennis. Yep, that is it for this week, you guys. We ended perfectly. I made it through what I wanted to make it through. So for next week, we are going to begin my story, how I got involved, which I'm hoping to make extremely brief since I know it pretty much by heart. And then we're going to, again, dive right back into 1968, Jack, what's going on with him, where he's at, what he's doing. And then as these murders begin to occur and the communications begin to unfold, we will have Harriet Suchet back on to discuss her solves in those letters. For now, everybody, have a great weekend, and we will see you next Friday.
No!